Marino of Bulgaria, you know, saying that trying to congratulate Nieman, saying he played exceptionally well. But personally, I think the comment he made was laced with some kind of accusation. So I said, you know what? Let me check out the game he played. Number one, I want to check out. I'm going out to check out the game he played against. Sorry, what's his name again? Korobov. So now this is the game. It was an anti-Sicilian. E4, C5, Knight F3, D6, Bishop B5. This move makes it the anti-Sicilian, or I think sometimes they call it the Rosolimo variation. And why do people make this move? Most of the time, the move is made to kind of avoid the regular D4, C takes D4, Knight D4, which is the open Sicilian. But before Bishop B5 is not really a surprise weapon or whatever because it's a move played by a lot of grandmasters. And Hans Niemann being one of them. So Bishop B5 check, Knight D7, castles, A6. Normally in this position, you always want to jab at this bishop immediately. Because sometimes when you, for example, if you don't play A6, you make a move like Knight G F6, Rook goes to E1, and then after A6, the bishop goes back to F1 in one move. So that it doesn't have to stop on D3, that stops the pawn from advancing. So A6, bishop to D3, Knight G F6, Rook E1, E6. Of course, the idea is to get the bishop in the game, get the king safe, and then start some play. So bishop to F1, unblocking the pawn on D4 or D2 so that the pawn can either move to D3 or D4, depending on what kind of opening or what kind of play white is trying to go for. So B6. B6 is a modest move. You know, the other alternative is B5. And I think with D5, black and white can start putting pressure on the pawn, you know, engaging black before he has a chance of castling and getting his piece on the best squares. So B6 is a kind of a modest move after B6. And as you can see here, this game has been played before. This position has been reached before between Hans Nieman and Giri. This was like 2022. So the game continued, C4, bishop to B7, knight C3. And normally, you know, when you are playing a game, you always want to try to get the pieces on your king side developed so that you can keep your king safe. In the Sicilian defense, it's not the same way. Why? Because in the Sicilian defense, you're always told to develop your pieces on the queen side first. Why? Because you're trying to create some play on the queen side before you actually tuck your king in on the king side. So bishop to b7 was played, knight c3, knight e5. It's been played before by Hans, same Hans. We would actually check, Hans has two games played with the same variation. There's a game against Giri in 2022, which he lost. And there's a game against Yilmaz, which he won. So knight e5, d4, and knight takes, g takes f3, g6, and the idea is to fianchetto the bishop and put more pressure on the d4 pawn and maybe the square, depending. Because with a pawn on c5, black is always guaranteed to have a support for whatever gets on d4, either the knight or the bishop. So g6, bishop e3, bishop g7, queen d2, black castles. Now we have all the minor pieces developed. So the next thing we want to do is to connect our rooks by moving the queen of the back rank and probably centralize our rooks. These are the things we're trying to make happen. So bishop, rook a d1, centralizing the rooks. So we could pretty much say all of black's pieces are developed. All right, all of them are looking good except the bishop on f1. What's wrong with the bishop on f1? It doesn't really have a lot of potential or anything happening because number one is being blocked by his own pawn, and there's really nowhere the bishop can come into the game to have some kind of effect on the position. So, but if you look at black pieces are looking really good. All black pieces. So let's keep going. The game continued. Bishop to c6, Bishop G5. Now there's a pin on the queen. Anytime you're in the pin, you always have to break the pin. You want to attack the pin piece if you can. We move like H6. This is not possible. We're just going to lose a pawn because it's a queen defending. So the best is just to get the queen away from the pin. So and that's what happened in the game. Queen B8. After the move Queen B8, D5. I think I have no idea why this move was made, because before the move was made there was some kind of tension in the position. Probably there's no other way for white to build some kind of advantage, so it decides to move the pawn to D5 to kind of like cause the pawns to get fixed. Captures with the C pawn. Now capturing with the C pawn is very important. Capturing with the D pawn is not E pawn is not so cool, because there's a bishop F5 coming, and which is really going to give black a very good position. So captures with the C pawn, bishop to D7, knight E2. What's the point of knight E2? Every time a move is made in the game of chess, you have to ask yourself, what's the point? You want to know what's the plan. Pretty much the knight is actually trying to come to the king side for a couple of reasons. Number one, probably to shield the king from any kind of attack, but I really don't think there's anything white should be worried about when it comes to attack on this king. So the knight is not coming here for any defensive measure, but probably for some attacking measures, keeping an eye on the H5 square and the F5 square. So knight E2, rook to E8, centralizing your rooks. You cannot go wrong when you just put your pieces on good squares. And bishop G2, like I said earlier, this bishop is not looking good. I mean, you cannot come to H3 because there's a guy waiting on you on D7. You are not doing anything on F1, and even being on G2, you're not really doing much either because you have your pawns blocking you. So this is white's piece that really is not doing much for white. But if you look at black's pieces, all black's pieces are looking good. We have the bishop that has an X-ray attack on the long diagonal. We have the knight that keeps an eye on the H5, the G4, the E4, and the D5 squares. We have the bishop that has a choice of going either way. Okay. And of course, we have the queen, you know, can just move up one step off the background, connecting the rooks. Black looks good. And of course, looking at the pawn structure, we see that black has 4 against 2. So you know what that means? Black can easily create a pass pawn on the queen side. Having the bishops supporting it, that's looking really good for black. But black went for some very weird plans here, which I really don't like, which don't make sense to me, and I'm going to tell you what I feel about it. So after B5, King H1, A7. Like I said, probably trying to create a pass pawn because he has the majority, the 3 against 2. Knight G3. Like I said earlier, this move is not a defensive move. It's more of an attacking move because there is no way black is going to create any play on white's part of the board. It's not going to happen. So Knight G3. Yeah, this is a dumb move as far as I'm concerned. This is a very bad move. Why? Principles wise, you don't move a pawn where you're being attacked. Don't make no sense. It doesn't matter if you're GM or you're a beginner. If you do that, you're going to get punished. Unless there's a reason for the move H5. Let's think about it. For every move you make, there's got to be a reason, right? Now, could it be he's trying to play H4? H4 is not possible because bishop is just going to take and then you're just down a pawn for nothing. And then you've, of course, opened up your king's position. Maybe he wants to move the king to H7 and then bishop to, let's say, H6. But then it's still not really going to make a lot of stuff because anytime it takes back. The queen is in a better position. Black is going to have to be worried about the G file, especially with moving the pawn from H7 to H5. That means G6 is going to be a very weak point at some point in time in the game. And if you look at how this game ended, that is exactly what happened. H5, rook G1 makes a lot of sense. Now the rook is looking at the G7, not just the G7, the king on G8. As an experienced player, this should tell you it's a red flag. You have to think about, okay, what's going to happen when all the pawns on pieces on the file gets off the board and I'm left with just the rook and the bishop or the king. That's kind of trouble for black. So black has to start looking for ways to defend that, to get out of that kind of situation. But if you look at the next couple of moves black played, for me, it doesn't really make any sense. But let's check out the moves. The first is rook a7. What's the point of rook a7? You might be thinking maybe looking at the move, it might be for a long time plan of defending on the seventh rank. You know, in case the pawn moves up, you know, the rook can have a defense, which actually happened in the game. But you know, if we look back at this h5, we could always say this move was not a move that really makes a lot of sense. Because in this position, it's almost as if black is just trying to, you know, save a bad position that he created himself. I think prior to the move h5, black was looking good. But after the move h5, I'm not so sure. So rook a7, bishop f1. Now, one of the pieces is off the g file. The fewer the pieces on the g file, the stronger the rooks on g1 get. Why? Because there's a king on g8. You always have to keep an eye on that extra attack. Why? We're going to find out very soon. So bishop to f1, c4. Okay. Bishop to e2. Now, I like this move. Why? You're making sure your rooks are connected. You're making sure you have possibilities. Your bishop can eye the pawn on h5. Even though there's a pawn on f3, it's still a kind of an attack, something you have to be worried about. So here I think play bishop c8. Yeah, bishop c8. Of course, there goes bishop takes f6, winning the pawn immediately. Winning the pawn immediately. Knight takes h5. Bishop goes back. Queen h6. Now, it doesn't take rocket science to know that black is in trouble. Why? Black has just one piece defending this king. And we have three pieces attacking the king. And there could be a fourth one. So this is something black has to be worried about. And even though the dark squares are being controlled by the black bishop, it can't really do a whole lot. Because once the bishop is gone, the game is pretty much over. And then the question is, what's your rook doing on a7? What's your queen doing on b8? What about your bishop on c8? The only rook that really makes any sense is the one on e8 because it's on a half open file. You know, probably it's kind of hard for black to come up with any kind of defensive move. In this position, I think it will be worth it to actually bring the rook to give up the rook for this knight so that there's fewer pressure on the g6 and the dark squares. But let's see. Queen b6 putting pressure on f2. This is just some kind of looking for a counterplay, which is not going to get. Rook g2, multi-purpose move. I'm defending the pawn on f2. I'm threatening to bring the rook to g1 to put more pressure on black's position. Rook e7. Now the rook on e7 and a7 are trying to defend along the 7th rank. They're trying to defend along the 7th rank because this pawn is going to have to go at some point in time for white to make any headways. Another possibility is probably to push the pawn here and push the pawn to f5, trying to make this weak. But Hans Nieman has some other ideas. f4, rook takes e4. Now one of the pieces defending the 7th rank is off the board. Let's have that in mind. And I think one of the reasons why Korobov could have done this is probably he thought after the rook takes g6, f takes g6, queen takes g6, king f8. Probably thought Anton was going to go for this, but then this is just equal. Because there's queen f2, there's rook e7. And then if you notice, there is not a lot of pressure happening. There's not a lot of stuff happening for white any longer because the rook defends the 7th rank. That means every square on that file, on that rank. The bishop defends the dark squares. So it's kind of hard for white to make any headways. But Hans has a different plan. Queen h6 check. Bishop blocks. Rook takes, knight takes. Rook takes. Now there's a pin. There's a pin. So what do you do when there's a pin piece? You attack the pin piece. Rook g1. Threatening queen takes rook. And of course, rook e7 doesn't work because we have a queen check here. You have to come back here, and then there's queen takes check is mates. And if you don't move back, if you move up, I think we still have rook take, which is just crushing. This is just rook takes check, queen take. This is just winning for white. So let's go back. Of course, after the rook g1, bishop g4. No idea why that move was made. Probably probably what would have happened if queen goes here? What would have happened if the queen goes to? I'm sure there must be something. Let's see. He plays bishop. Oh, yeah, yeah. Queen here still doesn't work because of the queen check. Queen check is a very dangerous move. Queen check is a very dangerous move. So he plays bishop to g4. He plays bishop to g4. Bishop takes. Queen goes to d4, defend the rook, threatening the pawn. But bishop e6. Now g8 square is taken away. You don't have the rook back when the queen goes to h8, meaning you're going to have just one piece defending g7. And then comes the queen takes b2, which, I don't know what else black would have done here. But after queen takes b2, queen h8 check, king has to move up, rook takes check, king goes to f6, queen h6 is mates. So going back to this game, I personally think Korobov just messed up. I don't think it was a game that Hans just totally outplayed him for whatever reason. So not a good game by Korobov, not a good game at all. And I'm going to actually check out the other game played against Shaparinov just to have an idea what exactly happened. Against Korobov, I don't think it was about Korobov being outplayed, but I think Korobov just pretty much beat upon himself. Okay, that's it for now, and see you all soon. Cheers.